Welcome to Krackle Comics Weekly, episode 53. It's just me and Vince this week. Dan is unavailable. I think he'll be back next week, though. So it's a grumpy old man show with us. So I think, actually, there was a lot of books I liked this week. But we'll start. I'm Mike, and then Vince with me here.
Vince.
Yeah, but I want to start. I like starting with, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right.
How was your week?
It's kind of an annoying week in a couple ways. I won't get into specifics. But I'm happy that today's Friday.
Okay. And then also Valentine's Day this weekend?
Yep, got some plans.
Which makes a perfect segue into our first book, which is DC Love is a Battlefield. And I'll just keep it on both of us here, since this was one of those 80-page giants.
Yeah, so this is DC's like $10 anthology. They do this probably around every quarter. Maybe it's every 2 months they have one of these.
I feel like there's 6 a year. Normally they line up with quarters, but also any big holiday will get one.
Yeah, well, there's one's tied to holidays, and then there's usually some kind of anniversary or bullshit that they roll into one of these. They didn't plan for Action 1000 to be, perfectly spaced between Valentine's Day and Halloween or whatever. So yeah. I guess it varies year to year.
There's usually a summer special too that's like DC Heroes on the Beach or something like that.
Yeah, so I think the title of this is actually, it's just a general expression, obviously, but yeah. Of course people are going to know it potentially from the Pat Benatar song. I would recommend people look up the Freeway song, which samples Pat Benatar. It's a Philly rapper. So usually with these, you get mixed with top tier creators and then kind of lower tier or people who DC is trying to build up and give tryouts and things like that. So I have comments on some of them. Some of them I have quick comments, and some of them I have longer comments. So there's a Bat Cat story, and they're at Maxie Zeus's wedding on a yacht, but Bruce is there as Matches Malone. There is a reference here to Query and Echo, the Riddler's hench girls, and I wish we could see them more because I think they're they're not really essential, but they're kind of cool. And this is a corny story, but it does actually touch on the called off wedding, probably more so than any of the Batman books have themselves, which I found odd. Then there's a Wonder Woman story with an appearance by the obscure Wonder Woman villain Blue Snowman. But I'll say first, so obviously this is the Valentine's Day special. There are obviously a ton of stories in here, and I'll give DC props for, it's clear that they wanted to make the stories diverse as far as the representation. But this Wonder Woman one, I thought it was a little bit clunky. It went a little bit off the rails for my taste.
Yeah, I agree.
Just wasn't handled very cleanly. But I guess, if you really think about it, it's not too far off from the weird detours and rants that, comic booky villains go in anyways. But I don't know. I'm sure this is going to get, I'm sure certain select groups of fandom are roasting this story on social media. Probably not in a nice way, but I will keep it nice. There's a pretty nice Harley and Ivy story. I think this one's by Tim Seeley, of them reminiscing. Yeah, and it turns out that it's kind of going through their relationship history, flashbacks. No real references to specific actual stories, just things that could easily have happened along the way. And it turns out in the end, through the narration, that Harley is dying. She's it's not clear if she's sick or what. They're both old. Yeah, and there's a weird thing where Ivy, they both take a pill and they're both going to basically become poison ivy plant creatures, and then maybe they'll meet each other again in their new life. I thought this was a nice story, but it's also kind of interesting. I don't know how you feel, but I feel like this story, you can read it not with a romantic context. Everyone knows that is a thing that's done with Harley and Ivy sometimes, but it's not really explicit at all in this story. So I guess if you're a fan of that ship, I mean, you're probably a fan of their friendship regardless, but you can read it either way, which I think is interesting. And knowing how DC is sometimes iffy about that relationship, maybe it makes sense. I'm not, it could be just pure coincidence.
I would disagree only with the statement of they're iffy on it. I think that in recent, like definitely within the past 2 years, I think DC has really shifted and like they're going with it now because we've seen so much content with that relationship getting pushed out. And by pushed out, I mean pushed to the forefront of like, this is what we're going with.
I think it goes back and forth. Like, I think it's very prominent and explicit on the show, but I think even when the show was starting in the comics, DC seemed to be kind of backing off on it. Like, I think actually there was like the Harley Ivy miniseries like a year or two ago. And I think actually the writer came out on social media and said that she wanted, or I don't remember who wrote it. I think it was a woman. She wanted to do something in the story and editorial rejected her. And it had to do with their romantic angle. But it does seem like they're going more in that direction. There's a Hawkman story here. It's just fine. It's a good compliment to the just finished run, though. I have to be totally honest. There's this one story where Rob Guillory draws Big Barda and Mr. Miracle, and I honestly thought his Big Barda looked pretty bad. And I won't go further than that. Dick and Corey, they have a story which, you see Nightwing Starfire in the Valentine's Day special. Huge portion of fandom is going to get really excited, but I feel like this story is not at all giving them what they want. This is not going to get received.
I was excited though because Cena Grace was the writer on this.
Yeah, but the conclusion of this is we don't match as a couple, so people are going to be bummed about that. I lean way more on the Dick and Babs side of things. Some of it is generational, as far as if you're if you grew up reading pre-crisis, you're not going to be Dick Babs because she's supposed to be like 10 years older than him and a senator. And then if you grew up watching the Teen Titans TV show, you're probably going to be Dick Corey. So there's like the weird, we're kind of like in the middle.
Yeah, I guess we're the middle resurgence of Dick Babs because cartoon, and that was the more nomenclature thing for when because we're 95, so yeah, it's and then the Titan show's early 2000s. So I guess we're that really small sweet spot.
Yeah, it is interesting though. Coincidentally, just like the Batman Catwoman story, I think they are pretty much explicitly referencing their almost marriage from late New Titans. It's not explicit, but I think they like pretty much say like their marriage or attempted marriage. The art stands out strong in the beginning of this story, but then I felt like it just like weirdly nosedived into the ground. Like the last like couple pages of this, it's like 50-50. Like there's in the beginning, especially with Starfire with her hair and some of the effects around her look really nice. But then the faces for both the characters just go off the rails. There's a Sergeant Rock story, which again, to the diversity point, has a neat twist where Sergeant Rock thinks that this other general that he runs into has a crush on this woman that they're trying to escort, but it turns out he's in love with like one of his male soldiers. And they did save the best for last. I think leaps and bounds, the best story in this anthology is the final one by John Ridley, writing John Stewart Green Lantern and Fatality.
Yeah, it was very good. John Ridley had a good week in comics for me, and that was just one of I think he might bookend the show. I think.
Yeah, I mean, overall, all things considered, I actually kind of feel like this was one of the weaker ones.
Same.
And I don't know if it was 1 year or 2 years ago, but one of the recent Valentine's Day specials in this format, I actually liked quite a bit of the stories. And I don't know if that was last year, but this one was not the greatest. But the John Ridley story is the standout.
Yeah, I mean, I like the Batman Catwoman one. I like the Harley Ivy one, and I like the Dick Babs one. I skipped over the Hawkman one because, admittedly, I don't always read all 80 pages of this. So there are times when I hop in, hop out. But for the most part, like I liked all of them, but no real standouts here other than the Ridley one for me in agreement. But it was fine. I'll go to our next book, which is Black Hammer Visions #1. This was Patton Oswalt and Dean Kotz with Jason Wordie on colors, and this is the first issue of a new Black Hammer series where different creators are going to basically do one-shots focusing on one specific character of like the Black family core, but really kind of also focusing on the world of Black Hammer in itself. So this first one here, I thought was very, very good. It follows two high school graduates, Eunice and Barbara, as they reminisce on their school days, it's like the day of high school graduation, and also like they're kind of starting to drift apart a little bit. The main character from Black Hammer they focus on is Golden Gale, as Eunice is one of the only people in town that realizes that she's the little girl that doesn't age because she's stuck in her Golden Gale form, but really she's like a 50-year-old woman. So every year they have to send her to elementary school, and she starts to put the keys together, and eventually like goes to the farm and confronts her. And you think that she's going to get her mind wiped by Madame Dragonfly, and I think this is the right time to mention that like it's very much the looks of the two girls are very much the looks from Daniel Klaus's Ghost World. I can't remember off the top of my head what the characters' names are, which is probably funny because I have the names written in my notes, which I'm looking at, but. Like right down to like the glasses though. And Gail's like, no, don't wipe her mind, keep her different, keeps their individuality. And like I like the message of it. And the end sees that Eunice goes to meet Barbara at the party, and basically they make up. As like Gail's watching over the sky. So like a lot of big tributes to Daniel Klaus's Ghost World, and the theme's kind of similar there. And then the end of the issue ends with a quote from Amy Mann's song of the same name that I think was used in the movie. I've actually never seen the movie. Vince, I think you have. But definitely like a striking similarity to Enid. That's their name from Ghost World. Oh, I thought this was really good. I think Patton Oswalt did a really good job, and I liked Dean Kotz's art as well. And Jason Wordie's colors were solid.
Yeah, this was pretty bizarre with the Ghost World connection. It's literally like it's not hidden at all. He just like took those two characters, changed their name, and then crossed it over with Black Hammer. And there's like a copyright notice in the beginning for the song, and I don't know if that means that they cleared the song or that's just a courtesy that you have to do, and they're allowed to use the song. Without asking, I don't know, but. It's like very on the nose, but it's one of my favorite books, and the movie's pretty cool too. The movie makes a little bit of changes, and obviously the acting in the movie pretty interesting. Very young Scarlett Johansson plays one of the characters, but the thing is, I didn't like it. It's not like the cover says Ghost World crossover, so like it's like literally the first page. I'm like, wait, this is Ghost World characters.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I had that too.
And then I flip back and it's like the Ghost World song, which I don't remember if that's in the movie. I don't remember if it's inspired by the movie or vice versa. I don't really know. But I'm like, all right, this has to be it, right? And then like, I don't think there's ever like, besides that, they obviously have to or chose to credit whatever the song, which has the lyrics at the very end. Like, there's no like little thing where it's like shout out to Ghost World or something. And I was kind of expecting that at the end. You don't need it, but like there's totally people out there who are going to read this and have no idea what the hell is going on.
Yeah, I think with the Daniel Klaus's art though, like if you've read Ghost World, it's unmistakable what he's doing. But if you haven't, then it's obviously a lot harder. But having read it, I was like, it took me a few pages and I was like, this is familiar. And then I was like, oh, it's Ghost World. But no, I liked it a lot. And it's fun to read another Black Hammer series. It's been a while. I think I fell off near the end of it. So to get like a mini series where it's just its own thing in one shots should be pretty fun. The next one's Madame Dragonfly, but I can't remember who the creative team is. But I'm sticking with this. What about you? You sticking with it or gonna look at creative and make a judgment?
Yeah, for Visions, I'm down. Honestly, like I kind of heard about this announcement. And I thought it was going to be similar to the last book we talked about. I thought it was going to be like an anthology with multiple stories. So yeah, if this is like a miniseries and it's relatively context free, I'll probably read the next issue. I think Jeff Johns is doing one of these, which is kind of interesting. Rarely
Wait,
get out of DC.
John's is actually the next one. I think he actually is the next one.
He might be. I actually very recently was like, yeah, I haven't touched much Black Hammer at all, and I was contemplating, hell, should I just go in on these library editions? Even though the library editions, it's a particularly large and deluxe format, which I don't always go for, but it's not too far off from a lot of like Images hardcovers. But I think like one of them is like, it's like not really out of print, but it's like to the point where you can't get it for like, the ideal perfect prices online. So I don't know, I'll figure it out soon.
I think the library editions also have like one-shot issue that isn't collected in the trade paperbacks too. So like knowing you'll probably eventually grab for the library editions. But I think you've dipped your toe a little bit. You read that Black Hammer 1942 series, the World War II one, inspired by Blackhawks, which was cool. I read that one, and then I think you started the Justice League one with me, but I don't think you finished it.
No. And that's obviously not in the libraries due to the crossover factor.
But that has a very nice hardcover that was put out for it, though.
Yep. All right, Fantastic Four number 29 by Dan Slott, and bummer, there's a fill-in artist here by Z. Carlos. I'm not super familiar. Regular artist is RP Silva. I guess this is kind of an in-between issue, but it's not really. So 4 Yancey Street is back, but it's more limited without the infinite pocket dimension setup. So they basically walk back into their home and it's like, what's missing? What's fucked up? Johnny and his new girlfriend Sky, they go out on a date because like the Fantastic Car is fine, the house is all fine, except just Johnny just lost all of his stuff, I guess. And for some reason he freaks out about that. And so Sky's like, let's go buy stuff. And they're still trying to figure out this whole soulmates thing, which she totally believes and is into. I mean, that's her whole culture. And Johnny's still warming up to it, even though he like does like her. She's just a little bit forward because her whole culture is like, we're destined together. And Sue is also very, very critical of it or hesitant. So she's a creep and is just invisible, stalking them until she gets revealed. And then a crisis is happening, and Sue kind of makes Sky feel unwelcome with the team. So Sky kind of disappears for a second. And what's happening here is that King in Black is happening. So I think I referenced before because the previous arc was this like kind of like universe-threatening global event. And I was like, this is coming out at the same time as King in Black, but obviously it takes place before King in Black. Here's where the crossover happens. There's a moment where Johnny and Spidey have a conversation, but half the words in their word balloons are missing. And it says, want to know what they're saying to each other? Read King in Black #2. And like, that's a little clever, but also really cheap. So I don't really like that. I love the footnote, but not that way. Johnny, Sky, and Ben all get infected by the symbiotes. And then in the end, and Sue is basically like partially at fault for Sky and Johnny getting tangled up in it. And then again, Ben is infected, but in the end, I guess he can speak normally, even though a lot of these infecting people, it's changing their voice. But he's able to speak normally, so he communicates with Sue and Reed on the like comm, and is like, "Where are you guys at? Let me come help out." And then the final panel shows him infected, so he's gonna go fuck them up. This issue, highest on the cringe factor so far since I've been reading this book again. There's dumb references to Twitter and also ghosting, but whatever, it's fine. As well as I was talking about how Johnny is a little bit hothead and a little bit like dumb in this book. But I mean, again, what I've said with some issues, it kind of feels like a classic comic book. And for some people that's bad, for some people that's good. It kind of works for me right now on Fantastic Four.
Hello, I pressed the wrong button. Amazing Spider-Man number 59, Nick Spencer and Marcelo Ferreira. And this is part 2 of Negative Space, and I guess this is part 2 of 2, because definitely it looks like it's wrapped up. Peter's like busy fighting Mr. Negative's minions in the Feast Center while we get intercut sequences of Norman going back to Liz asking for her trust, and then like he takes Liz and Normie to go see Harry is Kindred, and like Liz is crying and having a breakdown. And then like Pete's inner monologue narration to himself is that he's starting to crack because he wants answers for what happened to his best friend, but also like he's getting sick and tired of like everyone in his like close vicinity getting hurt. Um, which I think Spencer's definitely doing like a play of like corruption what's happening because he's getting a little bit more brutal. Like there's a part where Mr. Negative like gives himself like Martin Lee gives himself up to like get the sins back to become Mr. Negative so he can stop the attack. And even afterward, Peter's like, no, I'm gonna basically beat you up and bring you in. But then Wilson Fisk shows up and he's like, hey, I'll take him from here. And then like he recruits him as like part of the crew to get the Lifeline tablet. And then like clearly, I think Kingpin it wants to get the Lifeline tablet to bring back Vanessa, and I'm guessing that's the main reason why he was seeking help from Kindred. So I'm assuming that's something we'll see play out. Pete then goes back to visit May, like out of costume, and she's wondering if she is somehow attracting these types of attacks happening. Because this is like the third time in Spencer's run we've seen like the Feast Center get attacked. We have like flashback panels to that, which was nice. But Pete says it isn't her and reassures her that like, hey, he just wants her to be careful and everything. I thought this would have been like a good time, or at least maybe we're building to Pete revealing his identity to May again, because currently she doesn't know that Pete is Spider-Man, which is weird that she doesn't again. Which I mean, that constantly changes in Spider-Man. But I think this is a good issue. Going back to the Kingpin stuff too, like he recruits Mr. Negative, and he's like, also you're gonna have competition. Like a lot of the villains are already sitting there too, so it looks like Spencer's gonna use Kingpin heavily, which is weird because also Zdarsky's using him in different ways in Daredevil. But overall, a good issue. I thought Marcelo Ferreira's art though here took a big hit. Like his Aunt May's face, she looks more like a goblin lady than an old lady. Some messy faces going on here, but otherwise a solid issue of Amazing Spider-Man.
Eternals number 2, I don't quite feel the same way. Written by Kieran Gillen, art by Saad Ribic. We open with a quick Thanos fight with Icarus and some trickery from Sprite that was teased at the end of last issue. It's kind of entertaining. They're like going through time and space while they're fighting. I don't fully understand it. There's some nonsense story about like a lineage of cavemen, and Icarus runs into them one day and is like, hey, just light a fire and then I'll show up randomly and save you from a monster, or kill a monster right near you. And so this family just like sits around this fire for their entire lives, and then the dad dies, and right as he dies, or later on, when his like grandson actually sees the monster and Icarus kills the monster. So it's just supposed to, I don't know, it's supposed to show that they're like, attached to myths and that they live forever. But their little resurrection machine is broken. So it's basically the opposite of the X-Men status quo currently. Cersei finally shows up in this book. Granted, I mean, it's the second issue. It's not like I've been waiting. There are more Hickman-esque info pages with some like Eternals history. And then the Eternals make references to the critically acclaimed film Chinatown and the critically panned film Geostorm. I'm kind of bored with this book. Every character talks like a stiff alien, which I guess is kind of the Eternals thing, and it was created by Jack Kirby, so that's also the blueprint, but it's just not very interesting characters. And then this was my main complaint with the first issue, is that Ribic's art is just inconsistent and a lot of times really distracting. Sprite just looks terrible in every single panel, and I really just don't care about the Eternals.
Yeah, I feel you there. I thought about maybe I was going to give it one more issue, but also I think ultimately, like you're right, I don't care about the Eternals enough. maybe I'll revisit this when it's all said and done, because this is probably just going to end up being like 12 issues and done. I don't see this going like 25, 30 issues. I just don't see it happening. You're definitely right about the Assad Ribic art. I do like the basically the murder mystery of who done it, and like selecting a new Prime Eternal. I like that stuff. That stuff interests me, but overall, as a cohesive whole, it's hard to get involved with characters that you're really not familiar with, / also like have never really been interesting in the first place. And there's a lot of that stink on the Eternals, which is a shame because I like Kieran Gillen. But I think for now, yeah, like if I hear it gets good again, like I'll come back to it. But yeah, I think I'm agreeing with you. You've swayed me that I think I'm going to be done for now on it. Over in Daredevil is Daredevil number 27. Chip Zdarsky, Marco Cicchetto, and Mike Hawthorne. Same deal this time around. Mike Hawthorne is drawing the parts in the prison with Matt, while Marco Cicchetto is drawing the parts in the prison. Not the parts of prison. He's drawing the Elektra parts as Daredevil. Matt is trying to fight Null in his head, and it actually manages to get like partial control of himself and save some inmates. And he saves some cops. And he beats up some of the other symbiotes. He tries to get to the electric chair to purge himself, which he does with like one of the inmates like pulls the switch and it's able to free himself of the symbiote's grasp on him. That was pretty cool. That was a pretty cool sequence. Kingpin is like restless since they left Typhoid Mary back in the city, and he wants to like rush to get her to safety because it's like we turned our backs on her, like she was out trying to save me. So he's like prepared to go back out into the city during all this. He's also getting like reports that like, yeah, the Avengers are down, Spider-Man's is down. Like they're looking essentially like at the field knowing it's not good. But speaking of Typhoid Mary though, she's on the hunt for Daredevil. And Daredevil is Elektra now. She's still trying to like grasp with how Matt does all this until she realizes she doesn't have to fight like Matt. She can strategize like herself. And she like fakes her death after falling out of like a window onto a car to get the symbiote Typhoid Mary away from her. That way, like it'll think she's dead and she'll go off. And then she sees the child of like that she was trying to save, and her mom got like killed by Typhoid Mary. So she like comforts the child and basically learns that like there's two sides to this Daredevil thing. After her mom was turned into a symbiote. This is still really good stuff. Still loving this book. The Marco Cicchetto fight scenes with Elektra, Daredevil, and the symbiote Typhoid Mary are really, really good. Some really cool wide shots inside like a construction building that's being built and stuff. And a skyscraper like with dark colors and whatnot. This is still good. I'm not the biggest fan of Mike Hawthorne, but his job with the Matt stuff in the prison works well enough for me.
Superman Wonder Woman enters its second issue from Dan Waters and Lilo Del Duca. This starts out reading kind of rough in terms of pacing. There's a neat idea, though, where John has to, at like 10:30 a.m. every day, he has to shoot a black hole within an alternate dimension to stop an alien race from dying and getting their world sucked into the black hole. But if he destroys the black hole, then they're all fucked anyways. Kind of interesting. That's very much like an all-star Superman kind of idea. Then Superman and Wonder Woman, they're like, hey, let's swap our tasks. So Superman was supposed to go fight Solaris, and Wonder Woman was going to race the like Brazilian sun god, but they're like, let's switch. And she gets that like rocket launcher that he shoots into the black hole and spams that at Solaris because he's just absorbing the energy. So at first Solaris taunts her and is like, hey, you're a dumbass. But she's like, no, you're a dumbass, because he's like suddenly overloaded with energy and he overheats and he turns blue instead of red. That's like the hottest version of sun or fire. And therefore he would be vulnerable to Superman. So he runs off. And then Superman is racing the sun guy. And then the sun is like, hey, that didn't really help. Also, I'm the sun, so I could just like totally screw you over because you're powered by the sun. So then Superman goes and punches the literal sun, and somehow I don't know what he's connecting with, but somehow that then hurts the Sun God because they're like the same thing. So a little checkmate there. There's lots of wacky comic science and logic in this title, which is fun. But this issue, kind of the structure of it, I felt it wasn't as focused as the last issue. It just felt a little bit jumbled in certain points.
Yeah, it had that rushed ending because it's only 2 issues, feel to me though. But I think Dan Watters has taken a lot of inspiration from All-Star Superman here, especially with the the opening where John has to like fire that black hole generator into that world. That's like very kind of All-Star Superman type of stuff here. I like the switch of it. I like the Lila Del Duca's art here a lot. I think the first issue was a little bit standout better with some of the splash pages than this one, though. But I think overall this was like a fine series. But this closes it out. I do think, though, I agree, it was a little bit rushed on the ending and was a little bit jumbled. But I did enjoy it. But I mean, how many of these books? It's one of the few of Future State books I guess we enjoyed. And into the second one, I can't remember. You didn't read Justice League #2, right? So I'll tell you what happens in Justice League. Future State Justice League #2, Joshua Williamson, Robson Rocha, and Daniel Henriques on inks. The Hyper Clans like looking to finish their plan of building a new Hall of Justice, and they're going to like use it to make it as this conduit over Earth and take over everyone on Earth, but not before the real JLA set aside their differences and they get to learn more about each other and to trust each other, which is the key to beating the Hyper Clan. So lots of great action when they bust through a portal to beat up the Hyper Clan, and a lot of good stuff with the JLA saving the day, and now having built real relationships with one another, they're able to take the next step as a team. So lots of small good character work here by Joshua Williamson, and I like this team. I kind of like the different personalities on it. The ending is a time skip, like a few weeks later, where things have gone back to normal, and the JLA looks to expand their membership. Where we're shown the likes of like Tim Drake, Miss Martian, Mr. Miracle, Shiloh Norman, and Guardian being considered. So this is pretty fun and good. I think this is definitely getting a spin-off book sometime in Infinite Frontier, and I imagine possibly being written by Joshua Williamson, because I think the only thing we know he's writing is that Damien series that's going to be coming out later on. So I imagine he might be on this too. But this is really good. It was fun. I like the dynamics of the team and hope to see more of them. And my few things of Future State I do like the Justice League. And then arguably the better story in this is the Ram V and Marcio Takara Justice League Dark story, which is your backup / co-main feature, because there's only 2 in here, and I think they're both the same number of pages. But Justice League Dark, I think pound for pound, by the way, this is the best combo. When looking at your Future State books, I think you get 2 very solid stories here that are like I just said, equally or better footing depending on your preference. Dr. Fate shows up to basically tell the truth to Etrigan as the crew looks to battle the Enchantress and get to the return to Merlin to try to stop him from taking over the world. Ram V is kind of doing the team is bested deal, and they have all their inner demons making themselves all off base. Merlin shows up with Jason Blood, with the twist was that Jason Blood is alive because Etrigan thinks he's dead. And by the way, he switched sides. He's siding with Merlin. As in Zatanna looks to like the memory of Wonder Woman for inspiration, and doing so makes Dr. Fate come up with a plan. And he makes the bargain with Merlin. So Fate has now, since he has the power that Merlin that doesn't possess, so that's the ability to see in the future, that he exchanges that for the safety of the realm and his team. So Fate takes himself off the board and becomes Merlin's oracle, saying that his friend's freedom is worth more, and it's a fair trade for him. So I like that ending. It was pretty good. I like the art too. So this was, I think, pound for pound, the best back-to-back combo for your Future State books.
On the other hand, Let Them Live, Tales from the DC Vault #1. This is this weird thing. The idea here is to spam out unpublished stories, aka inventory ones created for potential fill-ins. which it seems there actually were a couple of during Rebirth, for example, perhaps due to the initial double shipping. Like if you think of the Superman run, there are little gaps where it's not Tomasi and Gleason. Like for example, the Omnibus doesn't collect those. So here the idea is to grab those, smack them in here, and put a dumb ambush bug framing story. And I like ambush bug, though usually the rule with ambush bug is if it's not Keith Giffen writing him, doesn't really count. It's Elliot Kalan doing the ambush bug, and there's jokes to Deadpool, and I think Elliot's only other major comics work that I'm aware of, I think he had a run or fill-ins or whatever on Spider-Man Deadpool. Art by Mike Norton in Ambush Bug, and then the actual story here is a Suicide Squad story written by Jim Zub and art by Tradd Moore. So based on the fact that, you know, it's a Jim Zub, it seems pretty recent. I would guess maybe this was a fill-in, you know, circa Rebirth. So around the Rob Williams run, which Jim Lee initially drew for like 10 issues. This only features Harley and Deadshot, which is probably intentional since those are the essentially like the protected characters on the squad. It's unlikely that they will die or drop out of the team, so they could slide this in between issues 1 and 2, issues 20 and 21, issues 50 and 51, with little context. This might be partly due to the coloring, but I thought Tradd Moore's art seems really toned down here and kind of rough in areas, and I love his art in certain contexts. You know, Luther Strode and his Ghost Rider work, and he did that insane Batman story in black and white. And also, like, just him being on this issue kind of makes me question the entire premise of this series, because why would you bring in Tradd Moore for a throwaway fill-in issue, which you're just going to randomly put out, and that you may have never seen the light of day unless you plan to do this stupid inventory series years down the line. Ambush Bug annoyingly censors some bits through like the Suicide Squad story. I kind of think this is kayfabe, or maybe the Zub script is old, but they got more to draw it now, and maybe that's the premise. Like these are scripts that were submitted and paid for and were ready for fill-ins, but they never got artists because they didn't need to use the fill-in. So maybe they're like, let's get cool artists draw these discarded scripts. I don't think they explained it either way. They're claiming that these are totally done and they pulled them out the file cabinet. I guess I'll have to evaluate the contents of future issues on an issue-by-issue basis. You know, if it's a character that I really like or creators I really like. This one specifically, this first issue, kind of a waste of time. And I like the general premise of this series. There are tons of deep cut unpublished gems from DC, but that's not what we got here. I keep going, right? You didn't read this. All right, Morbius Bond of Blood #1. So this is kind of similar where it's like, why the hell am I reading this? Especially when there is some movie or show coming up. Marvel goes apeshit, flooding the market. You know, Morbius here, time for a Morbius Omnibus, 2 epic collections, at least 2 other paperbacks, a new series, now another one when that one flops. And they also threw out these weird one-shots to top it all off too. And they also do the, like it's probably already come out, there's probably a Marvel Tales Morbius, where they have like a very modern, like digital artist do a new cover, but then it's all reprints and it's like $4.99. But they also do these weird one-shots. And Ralph Macchio seems to be writing a lot of this disposable, like kind of tie-in media synergy stuff over the past couple of years. He was a longtime editor. He edited Daredevil for like 10 years and all kinds of other stuff. He's formally retired. He doesn't go into the office at Marvel. Well, no one goes into any offices right now, but you know what I mean. The only like major writing he did was he had a run on Marvel 2-in-1, like co-written by Mark Grunwald. And then he did those Black Widow stories with George Perez, which were eventually in Marvel Fanfare. So why am I talking about this then, after all that prelude? It's for the Tom Riley art and Chris O'Halloran colors, rather than some disposable house-style mess, which you would probably expect on this. I'm not sure what that says about Marvel's evaluation of Tom Riley, though, if they're putting him on this. I don't know if that's good for him or bad for him. Now, the writing here from Macchio is stiff as hell. like he's either going for this weird like Shakespeare-esque attempt with Morbius's characterization, or it's just like truly awful dialogue. And I'm kind of leaning towards the latter. But you just ignore that and kind of read it as if this came out of like 1971, but is drawn by Tom Riley. You do get a pretty adequate origin recap here. You know, how Morbius became Morbius, though Spider-Man isn't referenced here remotely. Then Michael Morbius's nephew, or like basically like a godson, is sick in this issue. So somehow he ends up going to Mr. Hyde, who is like, I got a cure for you. But it turns out the cure is a fake. So then basically Morbius beats up Hyde. His clothes are ripping the whole time during the fight. So he just had like holes in his clothes. And the kid dies. And that's like the final page is like he's looking over this kid's grave. It's kind of depressing and it's really weird. But the art here was fantastic. And that's the only reason you should read this.
All right. I mean, I'll say I flipped through it for the Tom Riley art. I did not read it, but the Tom Riley art was fun to look at. This is Radiant Black #1. Kyle Higgins, Marcelo Costa, Becca Carey on letters, but also it's also referenced as art with Marcelo Costa with Becca Carey. So I don't know if she was doing more with that, but this is the much hyped up debut for the new superhero series from Image Comics. It's the start of a new superhero universe in Image too. So a lot of hype with this. Also, you know, Kyle Higgins going back to comics. He kind of took a little bit of a break after Power Rangers. There was some overlap. He did write that Winter Soldier mini, but there is, you know, he had his big finale on Power Rangers. Now he's doing his own creator-owned work. And he's launching it with a superhero book that is kind of taking some inspiration from Power Rangers, but also you know, basically a lot of, I think, some strong Spider-Man kind of esque themes here too. Got to say though, I'm a fan so far. I love the design too by Marcelo Costa. And I mean, I like Kyle Higgins from all the way back from his work on you know, Nightwing. But also there's a lot of Kyle Higgins here in this book. I see specifically the setting of Chicago, where I believe he's from. He also had a Nightwing. He also had Nightwing go to Chicago in his Nightwing run. Nathan Burnett is our name of our main character, and he's kind of this down on his luck writer, forced to move back home with his parents after also, you know, hiding a serious amount of credit card debt, something like $38,000. And he's trying to be a writer out in LA and didn't cut it, but he's moving back home, and his parents are like happy to have him back, and they're like, hey, you can write from here, it'll be good. His childhood friend takes him out to the bar to try to cheer him up. And when they're like drunkenly stumbling out of the bar, they come across this like weird floating black hole like orb, and Nate touches it and he's transformed into Radiant Black. And he ends up saving his friends and some cops from the L train because they have like this standoff up there. And then he takes them to like the top of a building to like cool down because it's like, all right, what the hell is happening? But yeah, he saves his friends and he basically kind of opens up to him a bit, and he's like, dude, I can't kind of screw this up if I can do this, because when I was out in LA, it's like I had the opportunity and I blew it. He talks about how like he didn't even write a single chapter while he was out there, and it kind of blew his chance. And he doesn't want to do that with this. And there's some true empathy I think people can feel there with that. So that's where the kind of the Spider-Man, the everyman feel, I think, kind of goes to there with that. And then and his friend's like, hey, I'm here for you, I'll help you. And then the ending sees like a guy crushing down a wall, and his name's Radiant Red. So playing into the Power Rangers-esque thing here, I imagine there's going to be like 3 more other colored of these beings that we'll eventually see. Maybe some will be good, maybe some will be evil, but I really like the design here. I like the Marcelo Costa art, and I think Kyle Higgins has a strong script here. So I think it's a pretty solid first issue. Vince, how'd you feel on it?
Yeah, I liked it. First of all, disclaimer, I have no background on Power Rangers. I have no interest in Power Rangers. So from that perspective, this is very polished. I was really impressed by the storytelling of Marcelo Costa, some of which is surely from Higgins as well. But as far as the pacing, the visual character work, the timing of the splash pages and everything, just all on point in my opinion. Like I was really impressed. And you don't necessarily notice that all the time. unless it's bad. And yeah, there seems to be clearly some autobio elements here with Higgins. Obviously, there's the writer connection, though I don't think I read through his Wikipedia page, and maybe it skips over major things. I don't know if Higgins has been in humongous debt or has ever had like a really failed moment in his writing career, but definitely the Chicago connection, the writing, and everything. It's a really neat setup for the character, and I'm down for this series moving forward.
Yeah, I was curious how you were going to take to it, because I know that you have like no experience with Power Rangers outside of like maybe me showing you an occasional clip here or something all those years ago at Penn State. But yeah, I was wondering how you're going to take to it, and I was also wondering how heavy Power Rangers influences is going to have here, because he did just come off like a 50-issue run on Power Rangers and made that like a huge, success for Boom. So I was wondering how it was all going to work out. So far, don't notice a lot of the Power Rangers connections outside of like the costume kind of looks similar, and then the different colored radiance here. But I'm liking it, and also that's I chose this as our cover of the week because it's a great cover with all the different vibrant colors on it, and I like the design a lot. So, and then I'm sure we'll get to see more what the powers that he gets with this. It's kind of like a symbiote feel too, a little bit. So I'm sure. I'm down to keep checking this out. I wish Dan was here to give his thoughts on it too, but I think he would also like it. We'll have to try to get him to read it to catch up for this one. But Homesick Pilots #3.
Yeah, third issue of this series, which I think Dan has been the biggest supporter among us for this as well. But from Dan Waters, Casper Wingard, like we said the last time, Dan Waters slowly sneaking into this show a lot. This starts with a flashback to the first time that the kind of main characters as their band had their first show. And there's like a joke about how they used to sneak vodka into the venue in shampoo bottles, which like that's not sneaky. You're going to then look like you're drinking from a shampoo bottle. Just use like a water bottle. Vodka is clear. That was weird. But Ami, who's like our main character, she's still doing her ghost detective thing, returning items to the haunted house. Her friends are shook up in different ways. One of them, I forget this guy's name, but one of them is just like smoking on the street and skipping school. And there's some pretty cringe punk stuff. And then Buzz, who's the other friend, is like trying to actually figure things out and look for Ami, look for the other band that disappeared. And it ends with both Ami and Buzz being attacked by evil ghosts. And the one that Ami's dealing with is like an unwound VHS body, which is a pretty cool design, pretty spooky. I'm sure maybe someone has done that before, but it's pretty dope looking. And Buzz is attacked by like that horseshoe, which transforms into a different kind of monster. The art and colors are still great. The story slightly meanders this issue. This is kind of like, if it's a roller coaster, it's a slightly bit of a down issue. So maybe it'll pick up some more. Again, I'm pretty sure this is like I think this is tentatively an ongoing. So I'm not really sure, when we reach, a conclusion or a climax. Who knows? But this was good.
Yeah, it was good. I still like the art here, and there's been less of those black text pages, which I've been critical of. I guess my only other detriment to the issue is that I kind of felt like I felt like I missed something from 2 to 3. It felt like I missed an issue at the beginning, but I quickly was able to process it and figure it out. So it wasn't a huge problem, but so far this has been a pretty good series that we've enjoyed. And then I look at Dan Waters and I look at Ram V, and it's very quickly, I think we're finding kind of our breakout guys we're liking to follow in terms of the writing for 2021 here. We haven't had a lot of that in the art yet, but I imagine that'll happen, soon as well. But I think 2021 for new writers for us to follow, Ram V and Dan Waters, and I'll throw John Ridley in there too, as 3 people that have been kind of like been stellar from, we're only in the second month of the year, but still kind of strong starts all around. But I'll take us into kind of a mini X-Men corner this week. And once again, I'll just leave it on both of us because it's another kind of anthology book. But Wolverine, Black, White, and Blood #3. 3 stories in here: 32 Warriors and a Broken Heart by John Ridley and Jorge Fornez, Burn by Donny Cates and Chris Bocciolo, and then Red Planet Blues by Jed McKay and Jesus Saez. So 32 Warriors and a Broken Heart, I think this issue, by the way, started with possibly the best story we've seen in the book so far, and then quickly tapers off. Wolverine fights a Silver Samurai who's kidnapped his daughter with Mariko, and he's got to fight 32 different types of warriors with her in order to reunite with his daughter. And basically Silver Samurai confronts them about being absent parents, because the last warrior they have to fight is their daughter, who ends up stabbing Wolverine, and they have to reconcile through that. Awesome stuff here. This is clearly the headliner story. John Ridley's very good with the monologue, and then paired with Fornez, who just gets to use the red better than anyone we've seen so far in this book. And then just compounded with like his action scenes. Like, this is A+ stuff. Like, this is by far, if this was just the issue, it would be my pick of the week. But because stories 2 and 3 just drag it down, I feel like I can't give my pick to this. But I love this first story. The second story, Burns by Donny Cates and Chris Bocciolo. Logan and Frank Castle get a drink in a bar, and like he's sharing with them a story of the old time they fought the Juggernaut. Hey, look, it's Cosmic Ghost Rider, and the two team up to fight Juggy. When he busts through the walls, it turns out that story was him telling of what exactly happened now, which is kind of a weird thing because Frank's from an alternate, Cosmic Ghost Rider is Frank Castle from an alternate future. I don't know. It's an anthology book. I'll roll with it. Fun, but the Chris Bocciolo art is, wow, not great here, because normally it's kind of already hard for me to tell what's going on in one of his pieces, and then distilling it down to 2 values and a color doesn't help. So kind of very messy and hard to see for me here. Red Planet Blues, Jed McKay and Jesus Saez. Magic takes Logan to Mars to fight some of the MAME agents. They're just think AIM, but outer space. Man, I don't really know. I normally like Saez's smooth style, but it's like very smooth here, and I think maybe the black and white plays into that. Like almost like everyone kind of looking plasticky and smooth a little bit, and it was just like he fought some guys, and then Magic showed up to take him back home. Kind of, yeah, the issue for me just kind of got weaker as it went on, but that Ridley and Fornez story was really, really good.
Yeah, double dose of John Ridley. Fantastic on both fronts, on the DC book as well. Fornez is just insane. I think the Japanese setting is perfect for this format. Even though the Claremont and LaRocca cover was also in Japan, but I think that story but that story they used way too much red. But this one, except for like certain pages, like in the very end, I thought they went overboard with the red. They had the whole temple red. They had a whole part of the background red. But here they're using the rising sun symbology. They've got the logo on Silver Samurai's armor. There's blood, but it's not like insane like that Declan Shalvey story where we end up having a full page of red. I love Bocciolo, but I agree that I feel like the depth that color adds probably raises his style and changes a lot more than some other artists, which are more simplistic in their style and things like that. But I also give zero fucks about Cosmic Ghost Rider. And then, honestly, I think Jesus Saez is a god-awful match for this series. There's just too much depth to and texture to his figures. And this story feels like someone took a finished comic book and ripped out the color rather than never, putting color in the first place. Like this, It doesn't feel like this was drawn with the intention of it not being colored. It really felt weird. Like I flipped to the page and I'm like, I kind of expected it to be in color just because of his style. And I think it's a bad match.
Yeah. The only thing that I think might be a plus with it is maybe, let's say he was using that X-Force costume that's, traditionally the black and silver one. And I think it helps it a little bit. But overall, like, the only thing I really liked the art is like Wolverine gets punched so hard that the white eye slits in his costume get knocked out. So it's you get kind of a weird image of Wolverine in his mask, but the eyes are just like his normal eyes, which was something normally we don't see with Wolverine. We've seen it a few times with Batman, but not much for Wolverine. But yeah, the standout here is the Ridley and Fornez story. Everything else is, give or take. I can't remember the lineups for next issue, but I think I sent them to you. But I don't know. I mean, we're still reading the book, but I mean, I was here this time because we knew Fornes was doing next issue. I can't speak for whether I personally will stick with issue 4, but I probably will. But X-Force.
Yes. A real X-Men book by Ben Percy and Josh Cassara. This is the Quentin Quire spotlight. He's reflecting on how he's constantly dying, and we get some instances of that. He goes out to investigate a cruise ship, and reportedly it was attacked by someone or something for getting close to Krakoa. He finds all kinds of bodies, but he finds an alive little girl, but then dies when he turns around before the reader sees the reveal. Now he's back alive because X-Force gets priority on resurrections. And they also get exact controls on their resurrections. So he's like been tweaking with his hair and also it's like, censored here and it's a joke, but I guess Quentin Quire made his dick bigger in one of his resurrections. He may have killed everyone.
He didn't make it. It's insane demands he's asking for. He didn't get any of them.
No, I think he's getting them along the way.
No, it sounds like they're just denied because it's like this is superfluous. That's the way I read it.
No, I think he's getting them, but the 5 are saying that they need to talk to Professor X and chill on and take that privilege away from them because it's getting overboard. So he's getting these like visions and things where he thinks he may have killed everyone on the ship, but not really. And then he goes on a little date with Phoebe Cuckoo, and she kind of does a little intervention on him. And we get a reveal here that he accidentally killed his parents, or maybe not an accident, but in an early outburst of his powers, he killed his parents, and they were abusive. A little bit of Rogue didn't kill her parents, but a little bit of the early age power awakening. Hurt someone. We get a little costume redesign from Jumbo Carnation, and then I don't 100% understand the ending. I guess Quentin's powers are out of control, and maybe he's being controlled by the creepy mask dudes, or Jumbo Carnation is being controlled by the creepy mask dudes. But it's like these 3 panels in a row where Phoebe and Quentin go back to check on Jumbo Carnation, and he like attacks them, but he's got like the psionic eyes, like as if Quentin's like controlling him or something. And then like in a half panel, one of the creepy mask dudes, which is one of the ongoing plot lines for this series, is like So I may have read it wrong, this ending, but this issue was pretty fun. I mean, if you hate Quentin Quire, you're gonna hate this, and sometimes I hate him, but I thought this was a good showing.
I like Quentin Quire a lot, so I was kind of waiting for this issue because we would joke when we do the recaps is like, oh, Kid Omega's dead again. So Percy clearly addressing that and had long-term plans for it, which I like. That's the Peacock Man who also he's now had appearances in Wolverine and this. And Percy writes both books, so he's clearly setting something big up there for both teams, which I like. I took it as like he's somehow gotten DNA and power siphoning off from what X-Force has dealt with, and he's doing something with Quentin that probably controlling him or using his powers to make it implanted like he feels like he's doing it. I don't know exactly, but he's certainly behind it. But this is a good issue. I liked it a lot. How do you feel about his new costume?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with it. It's obviously a change in kind of his character, where like previously it wouldn't have necessarily made sense for him to have a traditional costume, but now that Phoebe's kind of shook him and he's adjusting, he's in this new status quo, he has her, he's always hanging around with Wolverine. I think it makes sense, and it looks all right.
Yeah, and I like that too. I like the growth, the next level stuff for him, because like it was sort of wearing, like his personality was kind of wearing thin after, I feel like it's been over a decade, probably longer since he's been like that. So it's a good change up, and I'm excited to see where it goes. But that's the last book for us this week in our regular rundown. And then we always end with a retro book, which is Flash number 197 from May of 1970. Vince, you drew the the retro this week.
Yes, it was this, which has a wacky plot, which I'll get to in a second, or it was an issue of Superman where he becomes giant like King Kong. So it was a very hard choice, but I landed on this. This is written by Mike Friedrich, art by Gil Kane, inks by Vince Colletta, which I think is important. This looks very different from Gil Kane. I mean, this is 1970, but this looks very different from like 60s Green Lantern, for example. And I would say different as well from like his, I guess, later 70s Marvel work, like Amazing Spider-Man. So Flash 200 is generally considered the beginning of the Bronze Age for this title. So we're at the very tail end here of the Silver Age. Barry runs out in the snow to stop a thief who's getting around on skis, which is kind of funny. And the crook seems to have a heart attack, but it turns out to be his clever getaway. But it's not like he's pretending to have a heart attack. He's like temporarily stopping his pacemaker, which is kind of crazy. Iris is suddenly reviewing theater for the newspaper now, and she randomly suggests that Barry should get into acting. And for reference, if that wasn't clear, they're living together, they're married. They got married in 165, so not super, before this, but it's been like a couple of years. And she dies way later in 275. Gil Kane, I feel like he draws an attractive Iris, but she looks very 1970s. There's something about the hairstyle and also her clothing as well, her dresses. And their dynamic is pretty interesting. They're a settled married superhero couple. Obviously, this is way before Superman does that, way before Spider-Man, other characters. But there's a bit of dated tropes. There's like a little bit of like her kind of being the nagging wife, and he's like a little bit dismissive of her at a couple points, but it's not that bad at all. And so to her suggestion, it turns out that the police department coincidentally is putting on a production of Hamilton for some reason. Or wait, not Hamilton, Hamlet. That's a really stupid typo on my part. And the play is directed by ex-actor Dexter Miles, who is also the director of the Flash Museum. And the whole cast gets sick with a virus, or they just get sick. It's implied like they probably get the flu or something, which is a little bit eerie timing if for the real world. So the Flash decides to perform every role, even the women, at super speed. And he does it fast enough that he has conversations with himself, and the audience doesn't realize that it's the Flash, doesn't realize that someone is playing all the characters. So this might be one of his most impressive feats ever when you really think about it. But of course, the crooks that we met earlier show up to the show. And despite Barry being tired as hell from all of his acting, he stops them, of course. There's also this weird subplot where Barry has a lab partner, and there's like this idea that since they work together so often, they've developed like this secret code body language. And Barry accidentally does that while in his Flash costume. So then at the end, he has to like settle that because his like coworker shows up at their house, and Barry has himself dressed in the Flash costume, standing right next to Barry, sick in bed. And there's also a quick mention on that same note of how Barry has a separate Flash voice, which I surely knew, and it makes sense, but I kind of wish that nugget of realism just wasn't mentioned with any superheroes ever. That's where we get, the stupid Batman voice from Christian Bale. I really don't like that. Like I like superheroes having secret identities and the drama with that, and they wear their masks and everything. But I feel like when you take the realism to an extra level, like, why wouldn't people recognize their voice? Oh, so they have to have these stupid fake voices every time they're being a superhero. I don't really like that. That's just one of my little nitpicks across any kind of superhero thing. But this was a really fun story.
Yeah, we chose it because of that fun factor. Like you said, we had the choice of Kong you had the choice of Kong Superman or Flash play. I can't remember. It was Hamlet, right?
Yeah.
Doing every part, and you were like, that one sounds more interesting. And speaking of interesting, I thought this was very different art from Gil Kane here. It was a lot more cartoony than that style of, because I think we just did we just had a Green Lantern one from the 60s with the Flash in it. So it's kind of fun looking at both, almost a decade, kind of almost a decade apart, because I think that was like 63 when we read the other one. I'm unsure. But 7 years difference. It was a lot more smoother, a lot more cartoonier. And then looking at the character Barry Allen, he's married with Iris at this point, so there's a fun dynamic there. Back in almost a decade ago, they were still boyfriend and girlfriend, as we saw in that Green Lantern issue. But also here, in just like small things for me to notice, like Barry Allen's not wearing his traditional bow tie anymore. He's got much more of the collar necktie. So small things like that are interesting for me to just look at and see what small changes happen. But overall, no, I like this, and it was pretty fun. Kind of a fun, different take on his powers for using it, but possibly not one of our best, not one of our worst. It probably falls in the middle for me though. But picks of the week.
I always forget to actually think about this ahead of time. I think I'm going to give it to Radiant Black.
Radiant Black? Okay. I'm also going to give it to Radiant Black. My runner-up would be Black Hammer Visions, and then just that John Ridley and Jorge Fornes story from Wolverine. Those would be kind of my picks this week. Any runner-ups you want to highlight since it's just us this week, or nah?
I mean, yeah, there were highlights in the anthologies, but it's hard to pick, when the rest of them don't hold up, as opposed to Black and White, when sometimes the entire thing is 10 out of 10. Black Hammer probably also my runner-up.
So we were on the same wavelength this week. Feels weird. Feels like the last few shows we've been battling each other, but not really. But we're out of books. I don't have anything else this week. Anything hype you're hyped for next week? We haven't looked at books really for next week. So
I'm not sure. I don't know if there's any huge number ones or anything like that. So it'll probably be, the next issues in the series that we enjoy.
With that, yeah, that's all we have for you this week. Stay safe out there, and we'll be back with more reviews for you next week. Adios.
Make sure to go vote.